The most revealing political moment this week didn't happen on a debate stage or in a courtroom. In fact, it happened quietly with 2 votes, and almost nobody was supposed to notice. Welcome to Why It's Trending Daily. I'm Hank, and this is where I break down the things that everyone is talking about on Google, and I explain to you why they matter. So President Trump issued the first vetoes of his second term, blocking 2 bipartisan infrastructure bills that had both passed the House and the Senate unanimously. Yeah, you heard that right, unanimously. One of the bills would have delivered clean, reliable drinking water to roughly 50,000 people in rural southeastern Colorado. Sounds like a good thing. The other would have expanded land for the Miccosukee tribe in Florida and directed the federal government to help mitigate flooding in that very area. Now, these weren't ideological bills. They weren't partisan bills. They weren't controversial at all. In fact, they were the kind of bills Congress almost never agrees on anymore, and yet this time, everyone did. And then the president killed them anyway. Now, Trump justified the vetoes by saying his administration is committed to protecting taxpayers from what he called expensive and unreliable policies, arguing that the federal government shouldn't be forced to absorb massive costs for local projects. Now, on paper, that sounds like a standard fiscal argument, but the reaction that followed made it clear this wasn't just about money, because within hours, the loudest backlash wasn't coming from Democrats. In fact, it was coming from inside Trump's own party. Boebert, a Republican congresswoman from Colorado and one of Trump's most visible allies, publicly pushed back, saying the veto would deny clean drinking water to communities that overwhelmingly supported him in all 3 elections. And well, she didn't mince words. She called the bill non-controversial. She pointed out that it passed unanimously. And then she raised a question that, once asked, can't really be taken back. Was this veto political retaliation? Specifically, retaliation for her vote earlier this year to force the release of the Epstein files, a vote the White House openly opposed at that time. Now, that question matters because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Other Republicans who supported that same Epstein Transparency Act have already paid a price themselves. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once one of Trump's loudest defenders, has announced she's leaving Congress after publicly breaking with him. Thomas Massie, who led the effort, has been repeatedly attacked by the president himself, both personally and publicly. Now, Boebert is openly wondering whether policy decisions are being used as leverage here. And that's the moment this story shifts from infrastructure to power. You see, the veto power exists so a president can stop legislation that conflicts with national priorities or constitutional principles. But when a president vetoes bipartisan bills that passed unanimously, the message to Congress changes. It's no longer about policy alignment. In fact, it becomes about loyalty. And that kind of environment doesn't just affect politicians, it reshapes how the entire system functions. Lawmakers stop asking, is this good policy? And they start asking, will this get me punished? That's how cooperation in the government dies. That's how gridlock hardens. And that's how voters end up with a government that can't do even the most basic things like deliver water to its citizens. There's also a broader pattern forming here. You see, the White House has hinted at withholding federal funding from institutions in Colorado amid unrelated disputes with the state's governor. Now, Trump has repeatedly called for the release of a former election official convicted in state court, attacking state leaders who refused to intervene. And he's been explicit about targeting people he believes have crossed him politically. So when a veto lands, and it lands on a district represented by someone who defied him, people, they notice, even people on his own side of the aisle. And that's why this moment matters more than it might look at first glance. Congress technically can override these vetoes with a 2/3 vote, and lawmakers are already discussing bringing the bills back. But the damage isn't procedural, it's psychological. Because once members of the president's own party are publicly questioning whether legislation is being blocked as punishment, trust inside the system starts to erode entirely. And once that trust is gone, everything slows down. Projects stall, deals collapse, and governance turns into a loyalty test. And this matters to you and me because infrastructure, water access, and federal funding aren't abstract political talking points here. They affect where people can live, what they pay, and whether communities can function at all. And when decisions about those things start being filtered through personal allegiance instead of public need, the consequences don't stay in just Washington. They spread outward. Whether you support Trump or oppose him, this moment draws a very clear line around how power is being exercised in this term. Not quietly, not behind the scenes, but wide out in the open. And once that line is drawn, it tends to get used again and again. And that's what just changed here. And that's why you're seeing this story everywhere today. I'm Hank, here to explain the chaos. You don't have to. If you want more content like this, you know what to do.